I never thought I'd see him again, let alone in a place like this. The Wilshire Grand Hotel sparkled under the lights that night. The rooftop had been transformed into a dreamscape of scented candles, silk-draped tables, and a soft piano melody drifting over the glamorous Los Angeles skyline. The annual Monteverde Education Foundation Gala was a major event, a gathering of entrepreneurs, artists, and media personalities, and it marked my first public appearance in years after stepping away from the high society scene. I wasn't there for the glitz, I had a personal reason, and I wasn't alone. I walked in with 4 young people, tall, elegant, each with a distinct presence yet moving as one. We turned heads the moment we arrived, not just because of our looks but because of the energy between us. I felt eyes from every direction, but one gaze cut through the room and made me pause for a heartbeat. I turned, and my heart sank. It was him, Gabriel Whitmore, the man who once meant the world to me, the one who promised to stay, until he found out I couldn't have children. The day he chose to leave without looking back, it felt like my soul shattered with every step he took away. 17 years, that's how long it's been since he left me. Gabriel stood in the crowd wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his salt and pepper hair swept back neatly, his eyes just as deep and sharp as they were back then, but this time I caught something else in them: confusion. He looked at me, then at the young people beside me, and I watched the confusion shift into panic, then because he saw what couldn't be denied. Each face, each feature carried a part of him. Tyler's pale gray eyes, Elena's high cheekbones, Lucas's strong jaw, Isla's crooked half smile, all things he couldn't explain. Because he left me, believing I could never be a mother. I gently squeezed Isla's hand as she turned to me, her lips pressed tight. "Is that him, Mom?" I nodded, my gaze locked on Gabriel. "Think he'll run?" Lucas asked quietly, half teasing, half serious. "He won't," I said, more calmly than I expected. "A man like him doesn't run. He'll try to face it, because he needs answers more than anyone else in this room." Gabriel began walking toward me, his eyes fixed. He struggled to keep a composed look, but I saw his hand tremble around his wine glass. Only I would notice that. When he was just a few steps away, he stopped. His eyes drifted slowly across each face beside me, as if fighting against a wave crashing inside him. Then he spoke, his voice rough, almost unrecognizable. "Samantha." I looked at him, not cold, not warm. Just the calm of someone who's survived every kind of heartbreak. "I thought you couldn't." I lifted my chin. "This is Tyler, Elena, Lucas, and Isla." Each name rang out like a bell, cracking the walls of belief he'd built over the years. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again, and I knew. Gabriel Whitmore, the man who left in search of a complete future, was now face to face with something he never imagined. And I hadn't even told him half the truth, not yet, but I would. Gabriel stood there like his legs had stopped working. His eyes scanned the kids again, desperately trying to process what couldn't be explained. But the resemblance grew more obvious with each second, and I knew no words could hide the truth anymore. "They're yours?" he asked, voice rough, almost choking. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to face what he'd denied, rejected, and run from for nearly 2 decades. "Yes," I said, holding his unsteady gaze. "They're my children." Gabriel stepped back. He looked at Tyler, now a poised young man, dark hair and those unmistakable gray eyes just like Gabriel's younger self. Then Elena, her deep eyes and perfectly arched brows, a mirror of me but with his unmistakable presence. Lucas and Isla stood still, but their eyes never left the trembling man in front of them. "But Samantha, you said you couldn't, the doctor said." I cut him off, my tone even. "We used to believe that." A beat of silence. I saw Gabriel bite his lip, his hand tightening around the glass as if it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Whose children are they?" The question came out reflexively, not from doubt but fear. I gave a small smile, not mocking, just the bitterness of years held in. "Gabriel," I said clearly, "they are mine, and yours." It was like he got pulled from reality for a second. All the sound in the room seemed to fade, and I saw his eyes darken. "No, no, that's not possible." He stepped back again. This isn't real." Tyler stepped forward, hands in his pockets, eyes cool. Whether you believe it or not is your choice, but the truth doesn't need permission to exist. Gabriel looked like he wanted to speak, but nothing came out. I knew his mind was spinning with 1,000 questions, trying to rearrange the impossible. The man who once led an empire now stood frozen before 4 familiar strangers. I exhaled slowly. If you want the truth, I'll tell you. But not here. Not in front of all these curious eyes, hoping to watch us fall apart. Gabriel nodded numbly, but his eyes never left the kids. I need time. Lucas let out a soft laugh, no humor in it. Good thing we gave you 17 years to get ready. I turned to the kids. Let's go. Without another second, I led them away, leaving Gabriel behind in the middle of the ballroom, lost in his own world. I felt his eyes on our backs, heavy with something between regret and fear. As the elevator doors closed, Isla looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, will you tell him everything?" I glanced at the reflection in the mirrored wall, a woman no longer defined by tears or abandonment. A mother of 4, the sole keeper of a remarkable truth. "Yes," I said, "but I'll tell it my way, and only if he's brave enough to hear it all." The story wasn't over, but I knew one thing for sure. We didn't have to bow our heads anymore, especially not me. Gabriel Whitmore didn't sleep that night. He left the gala in a daze, haunted by the faces of 4 young strangers, each expression slicing through the shell he'd built over the years. Every step back to his penthouse felt heavy, every wall a reminder of what he'd once walked away from. The next morning, Gabriel called his private assistant Mason Leclerc, discreet, sharp, and fiercely loyal. "Mason, I need you to look into everything you can find about Samantha Everett," Gabriel said, voice low and tense. "Especially after 2007, medical, financial, legal, anything." Mason didn't ask why. He simply replied, "I'll get started right away, sir." Gabriel barely left his desk all day. He combed through old records, notes, memories of Samantha. Their wedding photo still sat in the bottom drawer, the one he couldn't throw away. Near midnight, Mason called. "Sir," his voice came through clearly, "I've found some very specific information." Gabriel sat up straight. "Tell me." Samantha entered a reproductive research program in late 2007. An experimental project called Novogenesis, led by Dr. Alden Rive. The program was highly confidential, focused on restoring fertility using stem cells and egg reactivation techniques. "She was a participant?" Gabriel asked, heart pounding. "Not just a participant," Mason said slowly. "She was one of the first 2 successful cases." Gabriel couldn't respond. He was silent for a moment, then asked, "Anything on the children? Birth records, hospital files?" "I accessed encrypted medical files," Mason replied, voice lower. "All 4 children, Tyler, Elena, Lucas, and Isla, were born at Briarwood Medical Center within 2 years of her treatment. Each has DNA records and—" Mason paused. Gabriel held his breath. "They're all biologically yours, sir. DNA match 99.97%. The world around Gabriel felt frozen. He set the phone down on his desk, unable to take his eyes off the screen where each child's profile was displayed. Name, date of birth, blood type, and a line that was impossible to deny. Father, Gabriel Whitmore. Mason was still speaking on the phone, but Gabriel no longer heard a word. A hollow feeling settled over him. Not because he had been deceived, but because he had been the one to slam the door shut 17 years ago, and now stood outside hoping it was still open. He sat in silence for hours, staring at the ultrasound image attached to Elena's hospital file, his eldest daughter. That should have been the moment he was there. That should have been the first image he saw in joy, not regret. Near dawn, Gabriel said only one thing when he called Mason back. "I need to meet Dr. Alden Rive, as soon as possible." The truth, like an underground current, had risen, and this time Gabriel knew. He no longer had the right to run. Elsewhere in the city, I, Samantha, still didn't know what Gabriel had discovered, but when I saw his eyes last night, I knew one thing for certain. He wasn't walking away. And maybe it was time I told the whole story, in my way. Every detail, every choice, every impossible moment that led to the birth of those 4 lives. And the reason I never went looking for Gabriel It wasn't because I hated him. It was because I needed him to choose to come back, not for a title, but for the truth. 3 days after the gala, the doorbell rang on a quiet afternoon. I already knew who it was. I didn't need to check the peephole. The air itself seemed to pause as I opened the door. Gabriel stood there, not in a polished tuxedo but in a rolled-up gray shirt, tie stuffed into his coat pocket. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept since the night we saw each other again. I said nothing. I simply stepped aside and let him in. This house had been my sanctuary with the kids. Now Gabriel was stepping into a world he had left before it even existed. Isla spoke first. She had just come from the kitchen, holding a steaming mug. When she saw Gabriel, her steps halted. Her eyes scanned him like he didn't quite belong in the picture. "Hi," Isla said, not cold, but not warm either. Gabriel nodded slightly. "Hello?" I walked into the living room, leaving the door open behind me. Soon all 4 kids were there, Tyler, Elena, Lucas and Isla, scattered across the sofa, facing the man they had never known but had always wondered about. Gabriel stood in the middle of the room. No one invited him to sit, and I didn't say a word. He took a breath and began. "I know I don't have the right, but I can't keep living without facing this. I need to know, and I need to be heard." Lucas crossed his arms, his gaze sharp. "Heard for what? To make yourself feel better for leaving before we were even born?" Gabriel swallowed hard. No, Samantha once told me." "You didn't know," Tyler cut in, his voice calm but heavy. "You didn't know about us. But you knew Mom. You knew the kind of person she was. Did it ever cross your mind that if she chose to be a mother, there was nothing that could stop her?" Gabriel was silent. I saw the turmoil in his eyes, an emotion I had never seen, back when he walked away nearly 2 decades ago. Elena tilted her head, her eyes unreadable. "If you'd known back then, if you knew there was a chance to have kids with Mom, would you have stayed?" The question landed like thunder in a still afternoon. The room fell silent. Gabriel didn't answer right away. He walked toward the window, looked out, then turned back. "I want to say yes. That I would have stayed. That I would have fought for it." He paused. "But if I'm honest, who I was back then? I don't know. I was scared of a life I hadn't chosen, and the truth is, I chose to leave." Isla placed her cup on the table. "So, what do you choose now?" Gabriel looked at each of them slowly, like he was trying to memorize their faces. "Now, I choose not to run. I choose to take responsibility. Even if I'm never forgiven, I won't disappear again." Tyler stood and walked toward him. One young man, face to face. "Your presence won't rewrite the past, but you can decide what to do with the present." I watched my children, each of whom I had raised without needing a father to define their worth. Yet now they stood before him, not pushing him away but asking questions. I stepped forward, calm but firm. "If you came here hoping to be welcomed, I can't promise that. But if you came to take responsibility, this door won't be locked." Gabriel nodded. For the first time, his eyes held something other than ambition or control. They held the desire to try again, even if only a little. Lucas shrugged. "We don't need a dad, but sometimes it's not the worst thing to have someone willing to listen." Gabriel gave a small smile, a rare one, full of regret, but open. He came back again that Sunday afternoon unannounced. This time he brought a file folder and a box of waffle cookies from the bakery I used to love, the one that closed down nearly 8 years ago. He remembered, or at least tried to. I opened the door and saw him there, awkward but not timid. His eyes weren't guarded anymore. They were waiting, maybe for permission, or a sign, or just a bit of hope. "I'm not expecting anything," Gabriel said, setting the cookies down. "I know I can't make it up, but I want to get to know them." I sat across from him, keeping my distance. "I'm not stopping you, but this isn't up to me anymore." He nodded. "I understand." At that moment, footsteps echoed from the stairs. The kids had just returned from the movies. They entered the room, sunlight glowing on their hair and shoulders. Isla noticed Gabriel first, her eyes briefly surprised. Then Elena, Tyler, and Lucas, each with their own reaction: suspicion, curiosity, a bit of caution. Gabrielle stood, hands clasped tightly to still their trembling. I know I don't deserve it, he began. But I'd like the chance to get to know you, if you'll allow it. Lucas raised an eyebrow, voice dry. Get to know us how? Picnics? Sunday dinners? Birthday cards for the next 17 years? Gabriel didn't argue. Nothing at all if that's what you want. I'll be here when you need me. Or if you ever just want to know. Tyler stepped closer, locking eyes with him. You sure about that? Gabriel nodded. I don't know where to start. But I'll be here, even if it's just to listen. The room fell quiet. Time seemed to pause, the outside world fading away, leaving only the sound of steady breathing and the weight of possibility. Isla turned to me. What do you think, Mom? I shook my head gently. I've already walked my path. The rest is up to you. Elena placed her bag on the couch, then looked at Gabriel. Do you have a car? Gabriel blinked. Yes. Then take us to the ice cream shop at Clover and Vine. It's open until 8. We can start with something simple. Gabriel nodded, smiling for the first time that day. Not wide, but sincere. Lucas sighed. I'll go. Not for him, just because the ice cream there is actually good. Tyler turned to me. You want to come? I shook my head and smiled. Not this time. You go. As the door closed behind them, I sat by the window. The sunset stretched across the neighborhood like a bronze blanket. I didn't wish for a miracle. I wasn't expecting magic. But even the smallest first steps are still steps worth taking. That night, when the kids returned, they didn't say much. Just a few comments. About the new ice cream flavor, how Gabriel mispronounced an order, and how he left his car keys at the counter. Those little things, clumsy, real, unpolished, were the clearest signs that something had begun. A second chance, even late, is still a chance. And this time, I wouldn't be the one to stand in its way. Gabriel began showing up regularly, but never forcefully, never demanding attention. He quietly sent messages to each of them. Not long, not dramatic, just, if you're free, I'm at the little bookstore near campus, found some interesting titles. Or, discovered a sandwich place near the dorms, saving it for next time if you're curious. At first, the kids didn't reply, but slowly each one began to respond. In their own way. Tyler was first, the most reserved yet too curious to resist. One day after class, he walked into the cafe where Gabriel was waiting. No announcement, no handshake, just pulled up a chair and said, I've got 30 minutes. If you want to ask something, do it. Gabriel didn't ask. Instead, he told a ridiculous story about losing his wallet in college and having to photocopy IDs to survive. It was so absurd that Tyler burst out laughing. A rare laugh, unexpectedly sparked in their first real conversation. Elena was different. She kept her distance, always leaning slightly toward the door as if ready to leave at any moment. But when Gabriel casually mentioned a local art exhibit, her passion, her eyes lit up. By their second meeting, she brought her sketchbook. They talked for nearly 2 hours. Not once did she say the word father. Lucas, sharp, cautious, and never easy, challenged Gabriel with probing questions. Why now? What if we don't let you in? Gabriel never had perfect answers, but each time, he looked him straight in the eye and said, I don't have the right answers, but I'm not disappearing again. And slowly, Lucas stopped flinching when Gabriel said his name. Isla was the last to open up, but the fastest to change once she did. One rainy afternoon, she texted Gabrielle, Bus stuck, you free? He showed up in 12 minutes, with a raincoat and a small umbrella. She didn't say much during the ride, but when she got out, she left a note in the glove box. Thanks for coming. I watched everything from afar. I didn't interfere, didn't guide. I simply observed quietly as the changes unfolded. Like a mother standing at the edge of a river, watching her children choose their own bridges to cross. One late evening, after all 4 had returned home, I saw them gathered around the kitchen table chatting aimlessly. Tyler talked about the art exhibit he went to with Elena and Gabrielle. Lucas teased Isla for calling him this year's most weather-aware man. Elena just smiled quietly as Lucas mimicked Gabrielle's voice when he got lost. I didn't join the conversation. I stood at the doorway, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, feeling something slowly growing between these people who were once strangers. As I headed upstairs, my phone buzzed. A message from Gabrielle. Thank you for not closing every door. I stared at the screen for a long time but didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't ready to say thank you. Because deep inside, one question still hadn't been answered. The real reason he left back then, was it really just because I couldn't have children? Or was there something else, something he still hadn't found the courage to say? One early autumn evening, with a chill in the air and yellow leaves covering the sidewalks, Isla walked into the kitchen with a question that brought everything to a halt. Do you ever regret it? It sounded gentle, almost like a sigh, but coming from Isla, our youngest, the softest and most sensitive of them all, it carried a weight no one had dared touch until now. Gabriel was slicing apples. His hand froze mid-motion. The knife tapped softly against the cutting board, then went still. He looked up and met Isla's eyes. Eyes that mirrored a younger Samantha's, clear but piercing through every wall. No one said a word. Tyler, Elena, and Lucas all turned toward Gabriel, as if they too had been waiting for that answer. Gabriel set the knife down, wiped his hands on a dish towel, and pulled out a chair across from Isla. He didn't deflect. He didn't sigh. He just sat in silence for a long beat before speaking in a low, hoarse voice, raw and honest. Yes, he said, every single day. Isla tilted her head. What do you regret? Gabriel looked at each face around the table, memories that had never existed in his life, yet now felt achingly real. I regret not being brave enough to stay, he said, for letting fear overpower love, for walking away instead of fighting, and most of all, for missing every single one of your firsts. No one interrupted, there were no excuses, no justifications. Gabriel continued, his voice steadier now. I once thought I needed a perfect family, the kind everyone expects. But in the end, what I truly needed are the people sitting right here. No matter how late, I realized it. Lucas still had his arms crossed, but his eyes had softened. Elena rested her chin on her hand, no longer watching him with skepticism. Tyler gave the smallest nod, barely noticeable. Only Isla kept her gaze steady. So what do you want now? Isla asked. Just one thing, Gabrielle replied. The chance to not miss anything else. If you'll let me. A long silence followed, not heavy, but contemplative. The kind of silence where hearts weigh old wounds against the possibility of something new. That night, after the kids went upstairs, I walked into the kitchen. Gabriel was still sitting there, eyes on the window, where the first winds of fall rustled through the trees. I heard everything, I said, pulling out a chair across from him. He looked at me, not defensive, not expecting praise or forgiveness. They've changed, I said, but not because you tried to do something grand, because you were honest. Gabriel smiled faintly. It's the only thing I have left. I looked at him quietly, and sometimes, that's all it takes. He nodded, eyes never leaving mine. What about you? I knew that question would come. But I didn't have an answer, not because I hadn't forgiven, but because some wounds no longer hurt, yet still leave scars. I still have something I need to ask you, I said, but not tonight. Gabriel understood. He didn't press. When he left, I stood at the porch, watching his silhouette disappear into the soft glow of the streetlights. Part of me felt lighter, part of me remained cautious. Because sincerity is the beginning, but to keep trust, that takes more. And I knew the real test was still ahead. Gabriel began visiting more regularly, but never crossed any lines. He didn't overstay, didn't disrupt the kids' routines, never asked anything of me. Sometimes he helped Isla with her science presentation, escorted Elena to a local photo exhibit, or played chess with Tyler late into the night. With Lucas, it was still a push and pull, but at least he no longer walked away when Gabriel showed up on the porch. And me? I didn't interfere, I just watched. I watched how Gabriel tried, without rushing, without scheming, like he was carefully patching a fabric that had long since worn thin. I saw the way he looked at the kids, how he gently stepped into each moment as if he'd found a treasure he thought was gone. And I watched myself, a woman who once resented him so deeply she wanted to forget his name, now feeling her heart soften in the most unsettling way. One late evening, after the kids had gone upstairs, I brewed 2 cups of tea and walked out to the back porch. where we could see the shimmering city lights in the distance, and hear autumn winds whispering through the old maples. Gabriel was there, leaning lightly on the railing, quietly watching. I handed him a cup and we said nothing for a while. "This view," he said softly, "you once dreamed of sitting here every night, with the kids, your husband, and a cat named Felix." I laughed, unable to hide it. "I hate cats." "I know," Gabriel smiled. "But you still said it. Back then you thought dreaming a little might make the pain easier." I didn't deny it. It did. Back then I thought you were the irreplaceable part of that picture. Gabriel turned to me, his eyes catching a faint glow in the dark. "I don't want to go back to that time," he said gently, "because I know I ruined it, but if I could, I'd like to help you paint a new one. Not the same as before, not perfect, but maybe something different." I gripped my mug, its warmth spreading to my fingers, but inside I felt another kind of wind, a wind of hesitation, and a question that had never been answered. "Gabriel," I said, locking eyes with him, "the day you left, was it really just about the children?" He froze, the wind blew stronger as if even nature was holding its breath. "No," he whispered, eyes dropping. His voice grew heavier. That was the easiest part to say, but the truth is, I panicked. I looked at the future and didn't see myself as someone good enough to stand by you. You were so strong, and I was weaker than I ever wanted to admit. His answer stilled me, not because it hurt, but because it felt like the missing piece finally falling into place. "I remember thinking," I said quietly, "if you had just said that, we could have found a way. Together. But you went silent. And disappeared." "I know," Gabriel whispered, "and that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life." Another pause. Then I lifted my head, gazing at the city lights that shimmered like falling stars. "We can't go back," I said slowly. "Too much has changed. I'm not the woman who once wrote Felix's name in her diary." Gabriel gave a soft laugh, but didn't interrupt. "But," I continued, "if you truly want to stay, for the kids, for yourself, and if you're willing to accept an imperfect beginning." I turned to him, meeting a gaze filled with longing but no pressure. "Then maybe we can become something else." Gabriel said nothing. He just nodded. And for the first time in nearly 20 years, we stood side by side, with nothing broken between us. Samantha's story reminds us that sometimes the deepest wounds become the foundation for the most lasting healing. The past may be filled with pain and misunderstanding, but honesty, patience, and accountability can open a new door, not to what was, but to something more real. In life we can't undo our mistakes, but we can always choose how we move forward, with courage and grace. What do you think about Samantha's journey and the choice she made? Would you give someone a second chance after being abandoned? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.